All right. So we talked about all of the quantitative data. It is important, I've mentioned a couple of times, to thank you so much, to put this in perspective with your qualitative data. And that can be through which some of your A&D firms here may provide these services. That can be around your interviews, your focus groups, your surveys, or your observational ethnography. And observational ethnography is just a fancy word for sort of walking around the space and observing. So we do that with photography. I have decibel readers that we kind of walk around and determine the noise level of spaces, all of that sort of work, right? But there are different ways that you can do this in the approach, but you need to have both sides, both quantitative and qualitative data in the discussion, and then build a case on what to do with that sort of information. Okay, so if you listen to none of that part of this conversation, the big takeaway to keep in mind is that what we have found through all of this research in space utilization is that, here it is, 70% of the work that is being done today is collaborative. 30% of the work that's being done today is more independent. Now you can argue the industry and the part of the country and all of that sort of stuff, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, this is what we have found through both the quantitative and qualitative data. This is significantly different from when we first started talking about the office in the 1940s and 1950s. That time period, the work that was being done was highly, highly independent work. Actually, it was about 70% independent, 30% collaborative. And so we have dynamically changed the way that we're working. This is not thought. This is real deal on the street what's happening right now. And so organizations can either get on board with this or not, but the train is sort of moving in terms of this hyper sense of collaboration. And if we think back to that research a long time ago that we saw from the A&D professionals, the state of the workplace trends for the US, A&D people believe that it's actually at about 86, 83% of the work that will be done, and they think in the next 3 years it'll be even more. So just keep that in mind in the discussion, okay? And again, I understand that this changes based on the type of work that people do in industry and all that, all of those caveats. But keep in mind, this is just where things link. This is around the whole idea of our concept around living office, okay? So now I'm just going to show you some landscapes of putting this process into work, all right? And then we'll get to change management. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. So just very quickly, in this process, so these are about shared seating. So this is a real client, and I want to show you here, this is their current space example. They have 0 shared seats, okay? 0 shared seats. But the idea is after you do space utilization study work, you find that maybe they could have more shared seating. So you see here that they have only 19% group space. And if we think about the other slide that we just showed you about how 70% of the work that's done is more collaborative, but yet only 19% of their space is group space, that's very interesting, okay? If it's the exact opposite, maybe it needs to change. So maybe that client doesn't go to 60%, maybe they could go to 32, or maybe they could go to 47% of group space. But if we look at shared seating, if we move beyond this based on utilization, I'm not saying that they go from no shared seats to 69% of their seats being shared, but could they go to 18? I don't know that they could go to 45, but could they go to 18? So it's just this discussion of being able to provide options for the customer in this conversation. So this is a real client. Unfortunately, they had all their private offices all around the perimeter of the building, but so not the best for them here. We did some baseline work for this particular client to understand how many private offices, workstations, etc., and then did our space utilization. This snapshot is around conference rooms. We also did private offices for them. So the red or the green line or the green dots indicate more usage of these particular rooms. Red bar indicates less usage of those particular rooms. So from that, in terms of programming, you can build a recommended mix for the client of utilization. And so you might turn that space into something that looked originally like this to something that looks like this, which is just a block plan, right? We're not throwing furniture in yet, but it's just a block plan of what could be. So you add in different types of features like hives and jump spaces and clubhouses and all that good stuff, which we haven't talked about, but we certainly can. So you do this sort of work to tell the customer from a baseline how you can move from there to a new option in terms of work seats, workstations, etc. So this is just what it could look like in the process. And moving, in this case, the idea was moving from 0 shared seats to 32% shared seats, and moving from 12% group space to 40% group space, to just consider that in the process there. Okay? So just some ideas in terms of how your programming folks could have this discussion. All right, so before I get into engagement, any questions, anything? I know this is a lot, but I promise this is really good stuff at the end too, so. Yes, ma'am.
Case about the 70% collaborative and then it's to be
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really, I think it's true. I think it's interesting. Why do you think that's right?
So the question is, why is this collaboration work at 70%, independent at 30%? One of the things that I didn't talk about in the future of work, the scenario planning, is this term that we're using of interdependence. It's the idea that it now takes, so the average 30-year-old will work on 300 different projects over a 10-year time span at work. I'm not saying that they're the lead on that project, I'm just saying that they're involved in those projects. So that is the reason why this is happening, because now it takes 10, 15, 12 people to move a ball as opposed to one person moving a widget from one place to another. And you all know this, right? You're working, a lot of us work in teams, and so it takes a lot of us to move a process forward. That's why things tend to be happening in this way, because of the complexity of work. The complexity of work requires people to work in teams and in groups. And we see this from kindergarten to where things are now. There's a whole sort of argument around the state of education and how people learn and all that sort of stuff, which I won't get into today. But you find that group work is something that happens for most 4-year-olds on into university level. And so it creates this situation of hyper collaboration because they're accustomed to that growing up. All right?